When I heard the splash in the river, my breath caught in my chest because I knew it was no accident. I don't even remember the exact moment my foot slipped. 1 second, I was stepping carefully along the slick rocks near the bank, and the next, the stone rolled under me like glass. My body pitched forward, and before I could even throw my arms out, the icy water swallowed me whole. It was not like falling into a swimming pool. It was like being grabbed by something alive, something that wanted to pull me down. The cold hit first, a shocking punch that stole every bit of air from my lungs. My mouth opened, but instead of breath, the river shoved itself into me, choking, stinging. The current slammed me sideways, spinning me end over end. I tried to scream, but the roar of the water was louder than any human sound. No one could hear me. I kicked hard, but the weight of my clothes dragged me like anchors. The bottom vanished. I couldn't feel the ground anymore. It was as if the river had no floor at all, only endless black pulling me deeper. I flailed, arms cutting through nothing. Panic filled my head. I thought, this is how people vanish. One moment alive, the next just gone, their names spoken in past tense. My chest burned. I forced myself to fight to the surface, breaking through for one strangled gasp. I saw only trees blurring past, sky tilting, the banks racing by. Then the water swallowed me again. The current was merciless. It didn't care if I lived or died, and that's when I saw it. A shadow moved beneath me, massive, silent. At first I thought it was just a trick of light, the sun glancing off currents, or maybe a boulder rolling below, but it was too smooth, too deliberate. It moved with intention. The shape was darker than the riverbed, sliding against the pull of the water. My heart stopped. It was alive. I remember the exact thought that shot through me. God, it's an animal. It's coming for me. The panic sharpened into something colder, more final. I had fallen into the wrong place at the wrong time, and now something out there, something stronger, larger than me, had noticed. My body locked. I couldn't tell if it was fear or the freezing water, but my arms and legs went stiff. I was a rag doll tumbling in the current. The shadow tilted upward. For a moment I glimpsed antlers breaking the water like broken branches, a head too big to be anything else. A moose, a bull moose. It was impossible. They avoid people. They don't swim toward drowning strangers. They vanish into forests, towering ghosts of the wild. Yet here it was, the shape swelling larger, closer, until I could feel its wake against my body. I was sure then, that was it. A wild animal in the water with me meant only one ending. It would strike, trample, shove me deeper until I disappeared. I couldn't fight the current, couldn't fight it. The river had chosen my predator, and I was helpless prey. For a heartbeat, the moose's bulk filled my entire vision. The surface broke around its body. Its massive eye, dark and unblinking, caught mine. I was so close I could see the ripples clinging to its lashes. My lungs screamed for air, my body begged to rise. But all I could think was, he's going to end me right here, and no one will ever know how. I braced myself. The weight of the river and the weight of that gaze pressed me flat inside. I was certain, beyond doubt, the animal would come at me now, and everything would be over in one brutal second. The river spun me sideways, and then, out of the dark swirl, the moose rose. Its head broke the surface first, water streaming down its massive muzzle, antlers dripping like the branches of some drowned tree. It wasn't just a glimpse anymore. It was there, right beside me, close enough that I could hear the wet huff of its breath. I froze. My arms stopped fighting. My legs hung heavy. I was staring at a wild animal the size of a small car, close enough to touch, and for a heartbeat, I thought it would strike. But it didn't. It just stayed. I don't even know how long we hung there in the current together. Maybe seconds, maybe an eternity. The world shrank to just his eye, level with mine, steady, black as polished stone. I had never seen an animal look at me like that. Predator's glare, prey bolt, but this gaze was something else. He was looking at me as if I mattered. The river still roared in my ears, the cold still crushed my chest, but I felt something cut through the panic. Awe. The fear didn't vanish. It was there, pounding, but layered with it was something I can't explain, something close to reverence. I should have been nothing to him, just another clumsy human caught in the river's grip. But he lingered, so near that I could see the details of his lashes, the shimmer of his wet fur. He didn't flee the way moose usually do. He didn't vanish into the forest. He stayed. And in that moment, the strangest thought filled me. He sees me. Not just a shape, not just a body flailing. He sees me. My heart hammered, my lungs burned, yet I couldn't look away. That single dark eye held me like a hand around my chest. It was calm, impossibly calm, in a place where everything else was chaos. I don't know why, but I felt myself surrender. My arms loosened, my fight drained. I thought, if he wants to finish me, let it happen. If he leaves, I'm done anyway. But instead of leaving, he edged closer. The river shoved me toward him, and for a breathless instant, I thought I might collide against his flank. His antlers arched above me like a crown of bone. His breath steamed against my face, and I swear, in that impossible second, it felt like we were suspended outside the river, outside of everything. He didn't strike. He didn't run. He just watched me, steady, patient, almost deliberate. And then it hit me, the thought that shattered whatever walls I had left. He's watching me like I'm his own. I can't tell you why, but that's how it felt. Not like prey, not like danger, but like recognition. My throat closed with something hotter than fear. Tears burned even as the river tried to drown me. Why am I still alive? I thought. Why hasn't he gone? The current jolted us apart for a moment, spinning me sideways. For an instant, I lost him in the white churn. I thought he had turned away, that whatever strange pause this was had ended. My chest seized with both relief and grief. I told myself it was over, that he had simply drifted past by chance, that none of it meant anything. Animals don't care about us. Animals don't see us. He was gone, I told myself. He was gone. I even tried to accept it. Better that he had left. Safer for me, maybe safer for him. Just a fleeting encounter with the wild, nothing more. But the river had other plans. Because when I rolled in the current and broke the surface again, sputtering for air, he was still there, not gone, not drifting, waiting. And in that moment, with water tearing at me and fear ripping through me, I realized I had been wrong, dead wrong. I thought he had simply swum by. But nature had prepared a different truth, one I wasn't ready for. The current seized me again and spun me away from him. I felt the river take me like a fist closing, tearing me out of that strange pause where our eyes had met. I swallowed water. The roar swallowed me back. I thought that was the last I would ever see of him. Then, through the white churn, he turned. I watched his huge body rotate, not head first with the flow, but sideways to it, like a door swung across a hallway. His chest faced the push of the river, his flank stretched broad and dark beside me. Water hammered his shoulders and split around him. I heard the slap of it on his ribs. He set himself there, broadside, and everything changed. The river that had been all teeth and hands suddenly had a hollow, an odd, quiet pocket behind him. I felt it catch me, tug me back into a softer pull. The pressure on my chest eased. My legs stopped pinwheeling. I was still in the river, still drowning, but there was space now. A breath lived there. I clawed for it and found air. I coughed hard, my throat burning. When I lifted my head, his flank was right beside me, an arm's length away, close enough to touch. Water slicked off his coat in sheets. The hairs lay like wet ropes. He smelled of mud and musk and something green, like river weeds in sunlight. He held his ground against the current, angling slightly, and the little calm behind him held me. I could not understand it. Moose don't do this. Moose don't plant themselves like shields for drowning strangers. This had to be some trick of the river, a happy accident of angles and force. He had simply drifted where he had drifted, and the river had curled around him, and I had been lucky enough to tumble into the curl. But then he shifted, just a little, a careful slide of muscle under skin, and the pocket moved with him, and I stayed inside it. I stared, stunned. The water pressed hard against us both. I could see his front legs scissoring against the current, not panicked, not thrashing, just working, strong and sure. His shoulder rolled. He edged half a body length upstream and turned a touch more, giving me even more of his side. The wake behind him deepened. Another breath came, cleaner this time. I took it and felt my lungs crack open with pain and relief. He was presenting his body to the river like a wall, and to me like a harbor. I reached without thinking. My fingers brushed his coat. The hair was coarse, warmer than the water, alive against my palm. For an instant, the thought terrified me. What if he spooked? What if I startled him and he struck? But he didn't flinch. He didn't even look away. His ear flicked once, that was all. He kept himself where he was, holding the force of the river on his chest so the space behind him stayed soft enough for me to breathe. A branch swept between us, a fat limb tumbling and spinning. It slammed his ribs instead of my face. He shuddered, then settled again. I felt the thud through the water and threw my hand on his side. He absorbed it like a tree in wind. The pocket held. Another roll of current grabbed at my ankles and yanked me sideways out of that calm. Panic blew open inside me. I scrabbled, useless, water filling my mouth again. In the same instant he moved, one diagonal step, then another, shoulders carving a new wall across the flow, and the soft pull caught me again, returning me to his lee as if he'd herded me there. I can't explain the grace of it. He wasn't frantic. He wasn't guessing. He was reading the river in ways I never could, setting himself so that the water did less harm. Every time the current tried to peel me away, he adjusted, an angle, a half turn, a steadying lift of his head, until I was cradled once more in the hollow his body made. My cheek bumped his side. I didn't cling, I didn't dare, but I leaned, just enough to feel a little heat through the ice. I felt the strength in him, the calm. The world was all noise and crash and cold, and he was the only steady thing in it. I wanted to thank him, to say anything, but my mouth just coughed river. He looked at me once more, that same dark, steady eye. He looked at me like I was his own, and I did not understand why I was still alive. The bank blurred past us. I could see stones rising where the water thinned, slick and gray, close and yet not. The current's muscles flexed and curled, hard to read, always ready to wrench me back into its throat. He held the line, the broad shield of his body taking the brunt of it, but I could feel his muscles working harder now, feel the low tremor that traveled through him into my bones. For a heartbeat, a foolish hope lit me. Maybe the river would let us drift this way forever, slow enough, easy enough, until I found a shallow where I could crawl out on my own. Maybe that's all this was, a gift of a few breaths, nothing more. He would angle off at the last moment, vanish into the trees, and I would crawl up the bank and shake alone, a chance alignment of animal and current, and my stupid luck. I almost believed it. Then the river changed. A new surge shouldered through, cold and violent, a buried ledge releasing a tongue of faster water. It hit me under the ribs and wrenched me out of that calm as if I weighed nothing. My hand slipped from his fur. The pocket broke. I spun, swallowed, choked, the sky gone again. The river had me back. I flailed once, twice, and in that blind thrashing, I told myself it had all been coincidence, a strange moment, a trick of wakes and angles, nothing more. I believed that. I had to believe that. I believed it was only a coincidence. If only I had known it was just the beginning. The river took me under so fast the world snapped shut. Cold closed over my head like a lid. Sound vanished. Light thinned to a green smear. I kicked hard, but the current grabbed my ankles and dragged me deeper. My chest howled. My eyes stung. I opened my mouth and the river rushed in like a hand. Up was somewhere above me, vague and far. I tried to angle toward it, but the water spun me and shoved me sideways. My back brushed something rough, then nothing. Panic spread like fire. I thought, this is the part where I go quiet and sink. A shape moved above me. Broad antlers like pale branches cut the gloom. Number, not above, coming down. The moose dipped his head into the dark with a slow, deliberate motion that did not belong to panic. The wide palms of his antlers turned, not to stab, but to scoop. One tine slid past my shoulder with a hair's width to spare. Another grazed my jacket, skimming the fabric instead of the skin. He tucked his chin and eased the palm under my ribs. Not a strike, not a hit, an invitation. Terror flared. Antlers are knives. One wrong push and he would open me like paper. I tried to twist away, but the current pinned me against him. For a single stunned heartbeat, I felt the smooth flat of bone settle under my chest with the gentleness of a hand. He lifted. The pressure changed. The river that had been pulling me down now had a new shape inside it, and that shape was rising. I felt his neck drive, felt the power in it, steady and measured, like a winch. My body slid along the palm of the antler, my weight settling where the bone was widest. He took me as if he had done this before, as if I were not a flailing thing but something he meant to carry. I broke the surface, coughing hard, vision exploding with white sky. The moose's muzzle burst up beside me, water surging off it. I gulped air. He held his head high to keep me lifted. I could feel the tremor in him, where effort met current, but the motion was careful. Always careful. He tilted a fraction, and the tine that had threatened my throat slipped harmlessly past. I felt his strength and his care so clearly, as if he understood I was human. Another surge slapped us. The river tried to tear me free. He dipped again, not diving deep, just enough to catch me before I slid away. The flat of the palm found me a second time with eerie precision. He raised me once more into air. I choked and spat and tried to help. I kicked in time with the lift, small, useless kicks, but it felt like agreement. He adjusted each lift by inches, watching me, feeling me, choosing the angle that kept the bone wide and the points away. Every movement said, not harm, not fear, not now. Only carry. A log rolled toward us. I saw it at the last instant. A thick, dark cylinder rushing like a battering ram. He swung his head, interposed his antlers, and the log clipped the outer palm, deflected. The jolt shuddered through him into me. He steadied, then settled me again with a slow, careful nudge toward the air. The bank flashed into view, closer than before. Stones, brush, a slant of gravel. Hope cracked open inside me. I could taste it like metal. I thought if I could just get free of the deeper chute, I could angle toward the shallows and crawl. I told myself I would hold my own weight now. I told myself I would not ask anything more of him. The current surged again. He pressed his shoulder into it and gave me one more push with the broad palm under my ribs. It was not forceful. It was measured, like a parent guiding a child across a street. My chest cleared. I took another breath that hurt less than the last. I risked a look at him. His eye was on me. Not wild, not blank. Present. Reading. I don't know what he saw, but in that gaze I felt seen back, down to bone and fear and a tiny burning wish to live. He eased his head to the side, and I slid off the antler into the pocket of calmer water that had formed near his flank. I paddled, clumsy and desperate. He moved with me, not blocking now, but shepherding, neck low, ears slicked, body big enough to break the river's hammer into smaller blows. When the current reached to take me again, he stepped across its path and made it miss. My toes brushed gravel, real ground, the kind that means an end. A sob tore up my throat. I told myself I could do it now. I told myself I could swim the last stretch on my own, that I should, that I owed him that much. I pushed away from his side, just a little, testing the water, testing my legs, tasting freedom on my tongue. He let me go that inch. He did not force, he did not crowd. He floated beside me like a silent escort. I took 2 strokes, maybe 3. The river felt lighter, almost kind. The shore looked close enough to touch. I thought, this is it. This is where I finish the work. This is where I prove I deserve the breath he gave me. I decided I could swim out on my own, but I was wrong. The river swallowed my next breath, and the world went narrow and black. I coughed, choked, and for a heartbeat, the sky vanished again. Cold closed over me like a lid, and the roar in my ears turned into a single, brutal note. I clawed up and broke the surface long enough to taste air that felt like knives. I told myself the worst had passed. But the river was not finished with me. It seized my hips and yanked me sideways into a new vein of speed. My arms were useless sticks. My chest burned like fire held under water. I had nothing left to bargain with. I sank, kicked, rose, sank again. Somewhere to my left, there was the dark, steady hulk of him, and then he was gone in the spray, and then he was back, and I did not know which terror to hold in my mouth, drowning or losing him. He came even with me, breath bursting in wet huffs, not ahead, not behind, beside. I felt his shoulder once, a brief brush of warmth through the freezing, and then again, slower, deliberate. It was not an accident. He matched my drift, my flailing, as if he were listening to the same music inside the current and choosing to keep step with me. When I rolled, he rolled his head to keep our eyes level. When I dipped, he dipped just enough that his bulk cut the worst of the pull. He was not saving me with one wild act now. He was saving me with rhythm. We moved together, stroke for stroke I could not make, and I felt the oddest thing. My panic learned his pace. My breath fell into the same slow count as his lifts. My kicks, useless a moment before, found a beat. I was still drowning, still afraid, but there was a thread inside me now, a line to hold, and it was tied to him. A log swung toward my head, heavy and dark, tumbling end over end. I cried out, only bubbles leaving my lips. He slid between us so smoothly it felt like a thought, and the log grazed his rib instead of my temple. He blinked water from his lashes. I felt the shudder that ran through him and into me, and then his body softened, made a pocket, and my face broke the surface again. That was the first time I felt gratitude cut through fear like sun through fog. It opened something in me. I would have said thank you if speech were possible. Instead, I just stared, a broken thing being carried, and he looked back with that dark, present eye that said, in a way beyond words, I am still here. The current bent hard toward the middle flow, the place that gleamed too bright and too fast. He did not fight it head-on. He angled as if drawing a line from my chest to the slanting trees on the near shore, and then he leaned. His shoulder met me with an unmistakable intention. It was not a shove to be rid of me. It was a steady pressure, a living weight, just below my collarbone, and it turned my body, gently, decisively, toward the bank. I could not help the sound that came out of me. It was part sob, part laugh, swallowed by the river. I felt his strength and his caution so clearly, as if he understood I was human and breakable. He did not spear me with antler or trample me with knee. He guided me with the broadest, safest part of himself, a shepherd's push that carried both warning and care. We slid that way for what could have been a handful of heartbeats or a lifetime. Each time the current tried to grab my ankles and twist me back into its throat, he was there, a shoulder, a rib, a flank, shaping the water before it could shape me. I learned to lean into him and then away, to accept his nudge, to let the river spend itself against him, while I took another breath. Panic did not leave me, but gratitude strode beside it, close enough that the two feelings braided together into something like prayer. The bank opened in front of us. Stones, roots, a low tongue of gravel slick with moss. It was close enough to smell the mud, to see the tiny white veins in the river-smoothed rocks. My toes brushed something solid and then slipped off it. I reached, failed, reached again. He pressed his shoulder to me once more, and the push was so careful, so generous, I could have cried a whole river in return. He held back a pace, as if to say, "Go on, take it." He did not crowd me or lift me again with bone. He let a small gap form, the kind that tells a drowning person they might yet be a swimmer. I kicked for the gravel with all that remained in me, which was almost nothing. My hands scraped stone. Hope burned bright and raw. I thought I had it. A sudden seam of faster water knifed off a buried rock and struck my knees. It was so thin I had not seen it, so strong I could not bear it. It spun me sideways and stripped me off the line like bark off a twig. The bank wheeled away. The shallows dissolved into a blur of green and white. The small distance he had left me opened too wide, and any strength I had gathered leaked out into the cold. I went under before I could even beg. The world above became a sound without a shape. I tasted silt. My chest locked. The river told me the same old truth. You are small. You are mine. But he had not left. In the green dark his shadow arrived, not churning, not frantic, just sure. He slid past my hip and shouldered me again, harder now, but still with that strange, deliberate care. He turned my body in a slow arc, and we rose together like hands cupping a single flame. Air tore into me. I coughed and shook, and he stayed, matching my crash with his calm until the panic inside me could hear the beat again. I do not know how many times he did it. 2, 3, maybe more, blocking, guiding, bearing the rush so I could steal one more breath. Time had thinned to the feeling of his shoulder and the shape of his eye and the tilt of the gravel bar that kept appearing and then vanishing like a promise. At last, the shore seemed to hold steady instead of flee. I could make out the texture of wet leaves, the curve of a pale root, the dark mouth of a shallow eddy. My heart climbed into my throat, and the tears were hot now, absurdly hot in all that cold. I thought the bank was almost mine. I thought the bank was already close, but the river had chosen to test me one more time. The river yanked me off the line as if I were a leaf on a string. 1 second the bank was a reachable fact. The next it was a picture ripped from the wall. I spun backward into faster water and felt everything I had gathered: breath, nerve, hope, tear loose and scatter. My legs kicked at nothing. The cold bit deeper. The sound went huge and empty at the same time. He moved first. The moose surged past my shoulder and angled away from me toward a pale lip of gravel I hadn't seen before, a hidden shelf just under the surface. He drove toward it with long, deliberate steps, as if he knew it was there and knew what it could do. The water foamed around his chest. Then, with a heave through the current, he climbed onto the shoal. It changed everything in an instant. His hooves struck bottom, and the current broke against his legs like split fire. The river that had been a single unbroken muscle suddenly had a knee in it, a hinge that bent the force into 2 smaller streams. He stood straddling the flow, a living breakwater. I shot toward him, helpless, carried by the fast seam he had refused. He turned just enough that his body formed a V with the stream. The near side became calm. The far side kept raging. He was making a pocket where none existed a moment before. I slammed into his forelegs. My shoulder hit the damp iron weight of a tendon, and for a blink I thought I would ricochet and be thrown back into the dark speed. Instead, I slid forward, and my hands found his coat, rope coarse and soaked and warm. Instinct took me over. I clutched fistfuls of hair. I pressed myself to him like the last support in this world. He did not kick. He did not strike. His knee bent and steadied. He shifted his weight until I felt the pull in the water ease around my hips. One wide hoof dug deeper into the gravel. The other braced against the oncoming shove. The river spat spray at his chest, and he absorbed it, a wall that refused to fall. My fingers were useless claws, numb and burning at once. I dragged them higher into the longer hair of his shoulder and held on. My cheek lay against the hot skin of his foreleg, and the heat felt impossible in all that cold. He breathed in great wet gusts above me, and each breath passed over my skull like a tide. He stepped again, small, precise, backward onto the shoal, and pulled a little more of the river's mouth away from me. The water around my ribs slackened. My feet brushed gravel, not solid, not yet, but a textured promise under the silt. I coughed so hard I tasted iron. He waited it out. A branch came knifing in low, rolling end over end, ready to scythe through the pocket we had made. He saw it before I did. He swung his shoulder, took the blow on the meat of his leg, and the branch caromed off, spinning into the fast water on the far side. He grunted once, a low, felt sound more than heard, and held his ground. He began to turn me without pushing, just by shifting the angle of his body to the current. The pocket pivoted. The pressure on my chest changed from a crushing hand to a guiding one. I found myself pointed toward the inside of the shoal where the water ran thinner and the stones grew taller. He made a small sidestep to keep me in the softest part of the swirl. I tried to crawl. My knees knocked stones I could not see. My hands slid and caught and slid again. Every inch took everything I had left. He matched me, one careful step for each of my clumsy grabs, never crowding, never letting the seam of faster water catch my hips. When I faltered, his leg was there, warm and certain, and the river had to go around us both. For the first time since I fell in, the shore did not look like a trick. I could make out blades of bent grass, the torn lip of mud where spring floods had chewed the bank, the dull shine of a wet root. I thought, one more push, just one. If I can rise to my knees, I can be someone who stands. He lowered his head, not to lift me now, but to read me, as if the tilt of my mouth and the flutter of my ribs were a language he could understand. Then he eased forward until his shoulder nearly touched my chest, and the water that was still trying to pry me backward had to slide off his side first. It lost its grip. I lunged, and my palms stuck to cold stone like hands to ice. For a heartbeat, I was certain I would live. He moved again, heavier this time, and the shoal groaned under us. Silt puffed dark. I felt the gravel shift and the pocket warp. The river did not like our small victory and pushed back harder. My right hand slipped. My chin hit water. My chest folded. I clung. He held. The sound roared inside my skull and then sharpened into separate notes. The chop of the split flow, the hiss of small water on stone, the steady thud of his heart through his leg under my ear. I rode those notes back to breath. He began to backstep, 1, 2, 3, drawing us up the slight rise of the bar. With each step, the river's hand grew lighter. With each step, the air felt closer to belonging to me. My knees found purchase. My toes curled in the gravel. I slid my weight forward until my belly met stone and skin, and then I eased it onto the bar, inch by inch, the way a seal might leave the ocean. He stayed until more of me was out than in. He stayed until I could feel the current tugging only at my ankles. He stayed until my arms shook less with panic and more with effort. Then he lifted his head, took one slow breath, and shifted the tiniest bit, as if asking me to try on my own. I shifted. The bar wobbled under me. The pocket wavered. I felt the world tilt and the water reach. Balance is a thin thing when you are all ache and cold. I felt my grip loosen, my elbows buckle, my chest slide. I thought I would fall off him into the water and lose everything. I felt the bar tilt under me and the river reach. My elbows slid. Cold hands took my ankles. The pocket we had made began to unravel, and the old fear rushed back so fast it emptied my lungs. I was going to fall, and if I fell, I knew the river would not give me back. He moved before I did. The moose dropped his weight into the shoal and drove forward, not away from me, but into me, a single clean surge that turned his whole body into a force. His shoulder met my hip like a low, rolling wave. There was no blow in it, only power. He leaned through me, and the river's grip broke. I slid up and out as if he had lifted the ground itself. Gravel scraped my ribs. Stone bit my palms. I was not graceful. I spilled over the lip of the bar and into the shallows like a netted fish, coughing so hard my vision pulsed. He kept coming, chest-parting water, until the press of his bulk made a wall between me and the fast seam. The world narrowed to three things: the harsh rock under me, the tearing fire in my lungs, and the wet heat of his body holding back the river. I dragged one knee forward and the other followed. The current clawed at my shins and then let go. I belly crawled 2 hand lengths more and collapsed on a patch of stones, slick with moss. Air burned in, raw and bright, and would not quite fill me. For a moment there was only sound, the hiss of little water over little rocks, the heavy, living breath above me, the pop and murmur of current breaking around a body too solid to move. I rolled onto my side, shaking, spit and river water stringing from my lips, and I looked up. He stood in the shallows, legs braced, chest to the flow, head turned toward me. Water ran down his muzzle in ropes. His ears were slicked back from the rush and then lifted, listening. We were so close I could see the wet edges of each eyelash. He did not look away. There was such wisdom in his gaze that I cried. It was not the wild stare of a frightened thing, not the flat look of an animal that does not know you exist. It was something steadier, older. I felt it settle me the way his body had settled the water. Tears came without permission, hot and endless. I tried to wipe them and only smeared river across my face. I whispered something that might have been thanks and might have been prayer. The word broke. He breathed, and the breath was slow, and the sound walked me back to the fact that I was here, on stone, alive. He shifted one hoof, and the pocket tightened again around my ankles, brief but sure, like a hand checking that I would not be taken back. Then he eased the weight off, reading my breath the way he had read the current. He was not done until I was clear. A small slide of water slashed at my calves, the last little trick of the channel trying to have me. He stepped again, putting his foreleg between me and the tug, and the pull fizzled into eddies that lapped harmlessly at the stones. He gave me that, and then he stood quiet, giving me time that felt like a gift. I pushed up to my hands and knees. The world swayed. My heart banged like a door in wind. I stared at the bank that was no longer a picture, but a place made of mud and grass and rooted things. I had not believed I would ever touch it again. I lay my palm on it and felt the grit bite my skin and the life of small plants bend. Somewhere inside the trees, a jay screamed once, and the ordinary sound of it almost broke me. The wild had gone back to speaking its own language. The river kept talking too, softer now that I was not inside its throat. He lingered. He did not bolt for cover or charge away. He stood in the current, guarding the small gate we had come through, as if he would hold it open for one more breath, one more beat, just in case I faltered. I lifted my head and met his eye again, and for the first time since I fell, I let myself believe he had chosen to stay. I wanted to stand and go to him, to lay my hand on that wet shoulder and say the only word that mattered. I wanted to thank him in a way even an animal might understand. My legs trembled like wires. I used a root to pull myself up to a wobbling crouch. He took a step back, slow and thoughtful, as if he knew being too close might pull me off balance again. His ears tipped forward. His muzzle lowered a little, the way a parent might lower a face to a child's height. The river pressed against his sides, impatient. He ignored it. I could not stop looking at him. The world had narrowed to the line between his eye and mine. Everything that had tried to kill me was still here, cold, force, noise. But in that look there was room for something else, a mind that had decided I was not an enemy, a will that had bent itself toward my life. I felt small under it and held up by it at the same time. I took a step, the stones sliding under my boots. My breath hitched. "Thank you," I said, a shred of a voice. The word blew apart in the open air, and the rush of water took the pieces. It did not matter. He had already heard everything I meant before I spoke. I wanted to step closer, to thank him, but he did something I will never forget. For a few long seconds, he did not leave. He stood there in the shallows, chest to the current, head turned to me, listening to my breath the way he had listened to the river. Water slid off his muzzle in ropes. His ears lifted and settled, like he was taking stock of the world and of me inside it. I lay half on the stones, half in the lick of the shallows, shaking so hard my teeth clicked. I couldn't tell if the sound I heard was the river or my bones. I thought he would vanish at once, melt back into the trees, become what he had been before I fell, a rumor of antlers and shadow, but he didn't. He waited, and the waiting felt like a question. "Are you here? Are you still here?" I raised a hand without meaning to. It was a small, broken movement, the kind you make when you've run out of language. He shifted one hoof and drew a little closer, not enough to crowd me, just enough to bring his eye level with mine again. The calm in that dark gaze met the storm in me and steadied it. I felt the panic loosen its claws. I took a breath that was mine and not the river's. He lowered his head and breathed once. Warmth brushed my face. It was absurd that anything in this world could feel warm after that water. But his breath did. It made something open in my chest and spill out. Tears came again, hot and endless, and I let them. I didn't try to be brave. I didn't try to be anything. I was a small, shaken thing staring up at a life bigger than mine. He lifted his head then and looked beyond me, up the bank, into the trees where the world had not noticed any of this. A jay screamed once. A drip ticked from a root. I could smell mud and crushed weeds and the sharp iron of stones. The ordinary came back, piece by piece, like furniture in a burned room. I wanted to laugh, and I wanted to sleep, and I wanted to pray, but all I could do was breathe and look at him. He turned back to me and held my gaze one last time. There was no hurry in him, no fear, only that steady presence that had drawn me out of the river's fist. I felt it again, the sense, impossible and real, that he saw me not as a noise or a shape, but as a person. The feeling broke me all over again. I thought, this is the end of it. He will turn now and go, and the river will close behind him like a curtain, and I will stand and stagger and tell myself it was just survival. I was ready for that ending. I wanted it, because any longer inside this closeness felt like too much for a heart to bear. He did not go right away. He scanned the water once, a long, deliberate sweep downstream and back. He dipped his muzzle and nosed the surface beside my ankles, as if testing the pull, as if making sure the small gate he had held open would not suddenly swallow me again. Only then did he shift his weight, unpin his legs from the force he had been holding, and turn. He moved slowly into the deeper run, step by step, the water climbing his shanks, his knees, his chest. Each step, sent a low shiver through the surface, and the ripples ran up to my boots and touched them and fell away. He did not look back right then. He didn't need to. Somehow I knew that checking me had been the last thing he did before choosing the river again. His shoulders went dark first, then his ribs, then the broad sweep of his back. The antlers were the last to go, pale maps against the green. At the edge of the drop-off, he paused and half-turned. Not a full look, not a human gesture, just a slow, contained pivot that let his eye catch mine one more time. It was there and gone in a breath, but I felt it settle something I didn't have words for. Then he stepped down and the river took him gently. Not like it had taken me, violent, greedy, but like it knew him and made room. He slid into the deeper channel and became current and muscle and motion, and then he was a darker shape under a brighter skin of water, and then not even that. The river closed, and the world was river again. I sat on the bank and shook. My hands were claws I didn't recognize. My knees knocked on their own. Every place the stones touched me, they left a print of cold. I tried to stand, and my legs folded, so I stayed where I was and watched the place where he had been, half hoping he would appear again, and half terrified he might. The trees breathed with the wind. A thin cloud crossed the sun, and the color of the water changed by a shade. Somewhere a woodpecker hammered a rhythm that sounded like a distant engine. I listened to these small things as if they were proof that the world existed outside my skin. I pressed my palm into the mud and felt grit bite. I pressed harder until it hurt. The pain was a bright, clean thing. It told me I was not dreaming. Still, my mind kept trying to say it had to be a trick, a fever, a confusion the brain cooks when it has nearly been drowned. But the river smell was real. The bruises blooming along my ribs were real. The heat where my cheek had leaned against his leg was real. My tears were real. The breath going in and out, rough at first and then easier, was real. I bent forward until my forehead touched the stones, and I let the sobs shake through. Not neat, not brave, just the honest, shaking sound of someone who has looked over the edge and been pulled back by something that owed him nothing. I cried until the grip in my chest loosened and the tremor turned into a tired tremble, and the air felt like it could live inside me without breaking. When I finally lifted my head, the river looked like any river. No trace of what had happened showed on its skin. The shoal was just a shoal. The eddy was just an eddy. If a stranger had walked up then and asked me why I was wet and bleeding and on my knees, I don't know that I could have made a sentence. I don't know that I could have convinced even myself. I whispered it anyway, to the water, to the trees, to the small, ordinary world that had come back. This could not have happened, but I saw it myself. I don't remember the walk, only the sound of water still pounding in my ears as if the river had moved into my skull. I stumbled through brush and root until the trees opened and the campfire's smoke found me. Someone shouted my name. Someone else swore. Hands caught my elbows. A jacket wrapped around my shoulders. Heat felt like pain. "What happened?" they asked. "You fell in?" Their eyes skipped over the bruises, the blood on my knuckles, the grit glued to my face. I tried to speak and only coughed. When words came, they tumbled, stones, antlers, current, breath, and I saw their faces tilt into the same puzzled shape. "A moose did what?" one of them said, half a laugh and half a challenge. "He stood in the river," I said. "He made a wall out of his body. He lifted me. He pushed me to the bank." They glanced at each other, that look people share when they are trying to be kind to a story they do not believe. "You hit your head," someone said gently. "Moose charge." "They don't help." I closed my eyes. Behind my lids, the river kept moving, and the dark eye looked back at me again, calm and present, and I knew if I let silence swallow it, it would turn into a dream like any other. I opened my eyes and told it again. I told them the way his shoulder matched my panic until my panic learned his pace. I told them how the broad palm of his antler had lifted me like a careful hand. I told them the way he set himself on the shoal and split the river into a safe side and a deadly one, and held me in the safe side until my breath belonged to me again. They listened and they didn't, the way people do when they love you and doubt you at the same time. Someone tucked the blanket tighter. Someone set a tin mug of something hot in my hands. "You were lucky," one of them said. "That's all." I wanted to argue, but the fight had gone out with the river. I nodded and drank and let them sit near me, and all the while I watched the picture inside my chest where a wild thing had chosen to stay. I slept like a person climbs down a ladder in the dark, woke at dawn shivering. The bruise on my ribs had bloomed into the shape of a wide hand. When I pressed it, the ache was bright and honest. I could not tell if it was proof or only a story my skin wanted to tell. At the ranger station, I reported the near drowning because that seemed like the sort of thing adults do. The ranger was a slow talker with river eyes. He asked if I had water in my lungs. He asked about the bend. When I described the shoal and the eddy and the buried ledge that made the thin, fast seam, he nodded and said, "She likes to take people there." Then I said the thing I had come to say, which sounded crazy even to me, that a bull moose had stayed beside me, that he had lined his body to the flow and made a pocket and kept me in it. The ranger did not laugh. He chewed on the inside of his cheek and looked out the window where the trees were already shaking off the night. "They can swim like a miracle," he said at last. "They know current. They know angles. Folks forget that. Do they ever help?" I asked. The word was a thin little boat. He shrugged, the way a man does when he has seen too much to bother with big answers. "I've seen a cow turn a black bear from her calf with nothing but her presence," he said. "I've seen a bull stand in a stream and hold a place the way a rock holds it, and I've seen the other kind of thing too." His voice dropped. "Years back, out this way, poachers took 2 cows in winter, left them for coyotes. We pulled a snare off a young bull that spring, wire grown into the skin like a second ring." He paused. "There are scars in these woods. They remember us. And still," he let the word hang there like breath on cold air. I walked out into the morning with my stomach shaking. I stared at the report poachers sign I had never noticed on the way in. I saw, as if new, the empty brass glinting in the dust near the trailhead, the old cut fence, the rumor of someone's cruelty left behind like trash. And I thought of the river closing over his shoulders, and the way he had paused, and the way he had looked at me, not as trouble to be run from or a threat to be broken, but as someone he could carry. In that quiet, the truth came hard and clean. If he had gone, I would not be standing here. If he had turned aside the way any sane animal might, I would be a story told by friends around a fire with a different ending. The only reason breath sits in me now is because a wild thing chose to hold the river and then hold me. If your heart is stopping for a beat as you picture that, if you feel the cold and the breath and the impossible choice, then you understand. Subscribe to the channel. We tell the truth about nature. Back at camp, I tried to tell it again, not to convince them, but to keep it from evaporating. They shook their heads and smiled and said I should rest. I did, but my body wanted the river. I went back near dusk, alone this time, to the bend where the shoal lay under that green skin. The stones bore the scrapes we had made. A tuft of dark hair clung to a twig, coarse as rope. I didn't touch it. I only looked until the light turned silver. I sat on the bank and whispered to the water, not fancy words, just the plain ones I had. I told the river I knew what it could do. I told the empty air I would not forget. I told the animal, who could not hear me, that he had changed the shape of my life. Nature is wiser than we are. Animals remember kindness even if we don't know how it passes between us. Maybe it runs the way current runs, invisible until it touches you, and then you know it by the change inside your chest. Maybe what we call miracle is only the world working at a depth we rarely see. I don't know. I am not here to explain it. I am only here to say I looked into a dark eye and saw a decision being made, and the decision was mercy. Sometimes I still hear the distrust in their voices. Moose charge, moose kick, moose don't help. Sometimes I still hear my own voice arguing back. But louder than both is the memory of the river's fist easing under the shield of a living body, and the way a shoulder shaped water so a stranger could breathe. I stood at last, and the day had grown quiet. No miracle announced itself. The bend was only a bend. The high bank wore the same scars it wore yesterday and the day before. Roots laid bare by flood, stones polished by years, the little torn places where someone once cut wire. There was no proof that would satisfy anyone who needed proof more than breath. I don't even believe myself sometimes, but when I close my eyes, I feel the lift of the antler under my ribs, the gentle weight of a shoulder, turning my chest toward life, the look that steadied me more than any rope. If you believe in the miracles of the natural world, know this: they are real. And if your heart is full of reverence right now, write in the comments, nature is wiser than us.